ring that bell and call to order the weekly Thursday noon meeting of the Rotary Club of Louisville here at the fabulous University of Louisville campus. I am President Barbara Sexton Smith, and the club likes for me to always say, in case folks don't know, I'm also the mayoral assigned interim chief executive officer of the Belle of Louisville Riverboats. There are 3. I know those of you born in Louisville think we only have 1, but we have 3, and that's why my nickname is Admiral. So at this time, providing our invocation today is Josh Suter, Director of Alumni Engagement at Indiana University Southeast and Vice Chair of our Administration Committee. Josh, you ready?
Sure.
All right.
Let's go.
Will you pray with me, please? As we gather today, we're reminded that great accomplishments rarely happen all at once. They come from showing up day after day, doing the work, learning from the setbacks, trusting the people around you, and continuing to believe even when others may not. The journey we'll hear about today is a good reminder of what can happen when a group of people come together around a common goal and each person does their part. And in many ways, that's a lesson that goes well beyond football. Help us bring that same sense of commitment and teamwork to our own lives and to the work we do through Rotary. May we look for ways to encourage one another, serve our community, and leave things a little better than we found them. Bless our speaker, our time together, and the food before us. Amen.
All right, thank you, Josh, so much. Now, walking to the podium, ladies and gentlemen, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the 4-way test is none other than Rensha Allen. Rensha is the brand executive for Allstate Insurance, and she is also our co-chair of the Speech Contest Committee. This is her first year to co-chair that. Rensha, here you go.
Alrighty. Hello, everyone. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and join me with the 4-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
All right, Rensha, thank you so very much. And you may be seated now. At this time, fellow Rotarians, whether you are a visiting Rotarian or whether you are a Rotarian member of this club, if you have a guest with you, please make your way to the microphone, lining up behind Kevin Fields. And as we do this, I can see you all are challenging me to make that same announcement that I make week after week after week. Now is the time, everyone, Rotarians and guests, please silence all your devices. Please silence all your devices. I think, Dr. Clavio, if I whisper, I think they will listen more likely. Okay, so let's silence our cell phones, silence our beepers, silence our watches, silence everything, and yes, that means those non-technological devices that we have up here right above our shoulders called our vocal cords. We're going to silence those also. All right, Rotarians, we got a bunch of you introducing, a lot of wonderful guests. So just remember, out of respect for everyone in the room, tell your guest's name, their role in their organization, and their organization. This is not the time for commercials. So here we go. Kevin, you're up.
President Barbara, fellow Rotarians, I'm Dr. Kevin Fields, CEO at Louisville Central Community Center, and I have 7 guests to introduce. They're part of a grand opening experience that we're hosting at the Grand Lyric Theater, and they are the Curtis family from San Francisco. So I'm going to introduce each one of them by name and have you to acknowledge them. First, introducing Papa C, that's Maestro, Dr. Maestro Brian Curtis. And next is Mama C, it's Nola Curtis. Zahara Curtis, who is the oldest daughter. And I'm doing them all in order because they are family. That will be Niall next, Niall Curtis. Isis Curtis. Kiki Curtis. And Phoenix Curtis. They want to network while they're here, so please feel free to reach out to the Curtis family as they travel across the country to share their gifts and song.
All right, thank you so much, Kevin, for bringing this world-renowned family singing group to our club today. All right, John, your turn.
President Admiral Barber, it's my pleasure to introduce two guests today. First guest is Katie Delahanty. Katie is the Executive Director of the Portland Boy Museums and is interested in perhaps joining Rotary. My second guest today is Scott Carruthers. Scott's a retired printing industry executive, and he also is interested in joining the club. So.
Welcome. Well, you're going to want to talk right into the microphone. There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good afternoon, President Barbara. My guest today is my favorite sister, my only sister, Kathy, and she's a retired educator with JCPS, and she does so much volunteer work, and she's ready to sign on the dotted line to become a Rotary today.
Okay. All right. Welcome, Kathy.
Good afternoon, President Barbara and Rotarians. My name is Anne-Marie Swerve with Real Clean Aircraft Detailing, and my guest today is Kat Booker. She's the Director of Development at the Flight Club 502 at Bowman Field.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Clayton Rogers with Central Bank and Trust. My guest today is Dr. John Dixon, and I wrote this down to make sure I get it right. Dr. John Dixon is the retired Director of Choral Studies and Professor Emeritus at LSU, founding Artistic Director of Coro Papati in Atlanta, Georgia, and currently the Musical and Artistic Director for the Louisville Master Chorale. Thanks for being here,
President Barber, Josh Studer, Indiana University Southeast. I have two guests today. The first, Joe Glover, my boss, who is the Vice Chancellor of University Relations. He's a member of the New Albany Club. We won't hold that against him. And then my second guest is Sarah Miller. Sarah is a lecturer in our School of Journalism and Media.
President Barber, I'd like to introduce my business partner, John Hunsiger. And when you visit with John, I'm just going to save you some time. Look at his shirt. He went to IU, and I was told at the end of the year last year that he predicted a national championship before they won their first game. He's pretty avid.
President Barber, Alan Singleton, I've got a couple people to introduce here, and it probably says something about me as much as anything, but all three of them are retired. So, anyway, Paul, Bob, Not Paul. Stand up, Bob. Stand up, Bob. Bob is your Bob.
Will Bob please stand up? Okay. Thank you.
Paul Best, and Bill Cummings.
All right. Well, thank you all so much, and we are so thrilled that everyone is here today. All right, so now we're going to take a moment to recognize our birthdays for this week. I've mailed some of those cards already, and I've got a few more left to mail. So birthdays coming up this week. If I call your name, please stand up so folks will know it's you. Alex Novak, happy birthday. Jean West Lasavio, are you in the room? And Mayor Craig Greenberg is an honorary Rotarian, so we recognize his birthday, as is President Dr. Eli Capilouto. Yes, Dr. Clavio, we wish a happy birthday to the president of that college up the road in Lexington, the University of Kentucky. And Bill Vale, Ray Strothman, Charlie Mattingly, and Coy Steele, wishing all a happy birthday. Except they're not here, send them notes, you all. If everybody in this club, send them a text message and blow their phones up. Make them know we missed them. All right, every week we welcomed our guests, we wish happy birthday, so now we want to celebrate everyone who has joined Rotary whether it's this club or another Rotary club, I'll go that far, in the last 12 months, please stand up so we can show some love and appreciation to y'all. Come on. There you go. And to our guests, if you wonder why we do that every week, and yes, the same people stand up many times week after week, it's because those of us who've been in the club longer, it's our job now to go up and talk to these newer members. Ask them what committee they're on, ask them what social event they've been to, ask them if they know how to get on DAC DB. And or maybe they'll show you how to get on DAC DB. How about that? All right. You all, this is such an exciting time of year because during the last several months, our club has been going through an annual process that many of you are very involved with, and some of you, this process might be new to you, and it is called our Service Projects Committee work. And our Service Projects Committee, if the leaders and members of the Service Project Committee would please stand up. I want everybody to see who this is. So we have Michelle Black-White as our vice chair, Susan Zepeda standing there on Michelle's right as our immediate past chair, Barry Allen is our current chair, and then Henry King just stood as our immediate past vice chair. So give them a round of applause. And Barry Allen is not here with us. He is hopefully in recovery mode at this point. He had a fall recently. Typically, I don't advertise and promote those types of things in the meeting, but he's here every week, and I knew everybody would ask me what in the world's happened to Barry. So he's starting to feel a little bit better. So what these folks have been doing with their entire committee, in May and June, they review all of the service projects that many of you have submitted. All right? And then it goes through this very intensive process. The application has to hit certain metrics. It has to check certain boxes. And trust me, if the boxes aren't checked, Michelle let us know. And I say that because I did not check all the right boxes when I submitted my very first application for a service project. So Michelle, thank you for guiding me through that. And I think I hit it about 2 or 3 hours before the deadline, even though they gave us about 5 months notice on that deadline. So what happens, you all? The service projects don't just come and go haphazardly throughout the year. They go through this process, the committee votes on them, they study on them, then they have to bring that before the full Rotary Club of Louisville Board of Directors, all right? Which has the officers and 12 members at large. It is a robust discussion at the Rotary Board level, looking at the dollar amounts, whether the dollar amount requested is $500, $1,000, or whether it's $5,000 or larger. Some of those grants are seeking matching dollars. Some of those grants are seeking partnerships with other clubs. Some of those grants are seeking district matching grant money. It is so exciting to watch how this unfolds. And I asked to take this much time on our agenda today because I've learned more in the last year about how we spend our money, what projects we support, than I've learned in the few decades that I've been in Rotary. So I wanted everybody to have a little bit better understanding, and there's one more step. The Rotary Board of Louisville does not have the final say. We have another board of directors. It's called the Rotary Fund of Louisville. For any of our guests with us, that is our foundation of our own local club. So then the board recommends it to the fund board, and then the fund board goes through a robust discussion, asking Susan and Henry and Barry and Michelle many, many questions, and they have to be well knowledgeable about every single project and answer every single question. So I am pleased to announce we are well on our way, you all, and the Rotary Fund has approved for this fiscal year, the remaining 26 and up through June 30th of 2027, many projects. You can see the Rotary Honors Scholars, the Interact and Rotaract clubs. Those are at colleges and schools. And then we have the West End School Literacy Program. How about the Rotary Unsung Heroes we have? There's the Educational Justice and Imagination Library. You've heard a lot from them lately. The Rotary Speech Contest. Thank you, Rensha, once again. And Rotary Leadership Fellows. That is our 3-year partnership with students at the University of Louisville who graduated with an MBA and want to learn more about civic engagement through Rotary. The Parks Alliance. Thank you, Alice Bridges. If you're in the room, you always keep us abreast. Re-Center, Larry Sloan and Alicia Gray for the meal service once a month. Habitat, Raise the Roof. You haven't lived till you've sat on the top of a roof hammering nails or hammering 4x8 sheets of plywood. Jay, I've done both of those in my much younger days. Thank you very much. And the Repair Affair, Refugee Family Support, Salvation Army bell ringing. George Breakmeyer, where are you? Lord have mercy, y'all. Thank you, George. I never have figured out how the very small Kiwanis Club in Louisville always beats this 12th largest club in the world for Rotary in raising money through the bells. But thank you, George. What? Oh my goodness. We're having some heckling on the front row. Be nice now, John Bush. I'm not going to call you out. All right, multiple water and sanitation projects that are medical related. Some of those water projects are local, some are statewide, regional, and global. And through our global grant projects, and then, of course, a very signature, incredible program that receives national attention, the West Louisville Housing Initiative, which we have more than 9 families that you have put into housing for the first time. Those are just a few of the service projects that we had. Okay, we're offering something for everyone, so here's why I spent so much time on that. If you see something up here that piques your interest and you want to know a little bit more about, just look up on Rotary, LouisvilleRotary.org website. You can learn all about our clubs and so forth. Ask somebody else around the club. Look on DACDB, there it is again, for the list of committees, and join one of the committees because we are looking for volunteers. If you are a committee chair or vice chair, oh, this is such a risk. Okay, raise your hand if you would welcome new members on your committee. Come on, y'all, raise them up. Okay, there we go. See those hands in the air, you all? Go see those folks and say, I want to be on your committee, or at least go volunteer on one of the projects. If joining a committee is too much for you, if you think that's too big of a commitment, well, just jump in and volunteer and show up. Because y'all showed up and showed out, yes we did, at a recent social event. So I know we can do the same thing with our service projects. So another big round of applause again for all the committee leadership. Okay, Alan, I think it's your turn, buddy. So I'm going to invite to the podium Alan Singleton, fellow Rotarian, president of CGB Argy Financial Services. Thank you so much for doing that, sir. And also Paul Harris, fellow 5, and he is going to introduce our speaker for today. Alan, thank you.
Retired president. But anyway, I'm kind of filling in for Ken. He's the guy responsible for getting our speaker today, but Ken wasn't able to be here today. Dr. Clavio is full professor with the media school at IU in Bloomington. He's director of the sports media program and also directs the National Sports Journalism Center. Dr. Clavio teaches courses in sports broadcasting, sports and social media, and the sports media industry. His research focuses on social and digital media usage within sports. He's also a host of the popular Indiana sports-focused podcast. I'm not sure how many people right here listen to that, but anyway, focused on Crimson Cat, named Crimson Cat, and it's the longest-running podcast focused on IU athletics. Given recent history in Bloomington, we thought this would be a very interesting conversation today. Focused a little bit maybe on football. But anyway, welcome.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks to all of you for having me here today. And again, I'd like to thank Ken Grossman for the invitation. It's an honor to be here to chat with you all for the next 20 or so minutes about what has been an absolutely incredible journey for Indiana University as an institution through its football program over the last couple of years. The picture you can see here on the side, what is that? Anybody know?
A full stadium.
That is correct. That's Lucas Oil Stadium. It's not even Memorial Stadium, but that was the podium set up after Indiana won the Big Ten championship game this year against Ohio State. Now, obviously, we're going to talk about a much bigger win here shortly, but I think we need to savor this first and foremost. Indiana, in its entire institutional history, had won the Big Ten exactly twice. Once was in 1945, immediately after the end of World War II, in a season when the Big Ten still wasn't sending any teams to bowl games. The second was in 1967, one of the most improbable years in college football history, when a lightly regarded Indiana team that had won 2 games the previous season won 8 in the regular season and made it all the way to the Rose Bowl, where they lost to the eventual national champions. That was in 1968. So it had been a long time since Indiana had even knocked on that door. And trying to encapsulate what this last couple of years has meant, not just to the football program, but to the university as a whole, is something that I've been trying to do on my podcast, Crimson Cast, here for the last couple of years. I want to give you a little bit of background about myself first. I'm a 4th generation Indiana University individual. My great-grandparents both went to IU in the early 1900s. My great-grandfather was being raised as a farmer in Newport, Indiana, when a horse threw him off and broke both of his legs. And hard to farm when you don't have full use of your extremities. So he ended up going to law school in Indiana and eventually became the judge in Vermilion County. My grandparents followed suit, and then my parents ended up meeting at Indiana. And then I went to Indiana as an undergraduate in 1997 and ended up meeting my wife there. So we have a very Indiana-centric background. I was in sports broadcasting after graduation, and when I was in school, I did sports broadcasting also. I got a chance to call several games for student radio for Indiana University football, including such highlights as traveling to the Big House and watching Indiana lose 58-0 to Michigan. I'm from the West Lafayette area. I went to high school at Harrison, and about 10 of us went to IU. The rest of my high school graduating class essentially went to Purdue. The last game I called my senior year was the game at Ross-Ade Stadium where Purdue clinched a spot in the Rose Bowl and Drew Brees essentially clinched his spot as the most important college football player that year. So that was a pretty bitter pill to swallow as an individual who had grown up there and watched all of his high school buddies celebrating on the field while I was miserable up in the broadcast booth. But that was the nature of IU football fandom for many people. And I want to stop for a second, and for those of you who have IU ties, how many of you would have considered yourselves primarily football fans prior to the last 2 years? A couple of you. Now, some people would scoff at that, but what I've always tried to say is there have always been IU football fans. There have always been people that have cared about the institution of football in Indiana. It's just that there haven't been many reasons to celebrate over the course of time, and it's been almost a quiet fandom where when we find each other, it's like, oh, you're one of us, which has been the joy of doing the podcast. I started the podcast in 2009, and it was the first podcast that really covered IU sports, but specifically IU football, and we were pretty much the only ones on the beat. So for a long time, that was where the conversation on IU football was. It was a small conversation. And there were occasional good moments. There was finally making it back to a bowl game in 2015. The kick was good, by the way, in the pinstripe bowl. There was the unexpected joy of the 2019 season when Indiana won at Nebraska and ended up making it all the way to the Gator Bowl and was leading Tennessee in the 4th quarter. And I blacked out at that point, so we'll just assume that game ended up all right. But there were, for every moment when it felt like the program had escalated, there was always that inevitable descent back into a lower level. And that was the most frustrating part of being an IU football fan, was that it was Sisyphean in nature. You would roll the rock up the hill and it would roll right back down again. So when Indiana announced that they were letting Tom Allen go at the end of the 2023 season, and they announced that they were hiring this gentleman that most people hadn't heard of out of James Madison named Curt Cignetti, I was interested. I liked the rhetoric that I heard from him when he was on College Game Day complaining about the NCAA. I liked the fact that he seemed like he had a good amount of confidence, and I liked the fact that profile-wise he seemed to match the last truly successful coach that Indiana had had, who was a gentleman named Bill Mallory, who had had extensive coaching experience at Colorado, at Miami of Ohio, at Northern Illinois, came in and had probably the most impressive 10-year run that anybody had at Indiana, at least since the 1930s. So you listen to Curt Cignetti talk, and certainly I think most of us remember that very brash moment at the basketball game against Maryland when he came out and announced that Purdue was not a high-quality opponent, but neither were Michigan or Ohio State. And most people, as they were talking about beforehand, were like, is this guy crazy? Does he know where he is? He's at Indiana. But the fact that Curt Cignetti did know where he was and understood that that attitude was exactly what Indiana needed in order to try to gain some level of confidence and some level of consistency in football is something I don't think many of us grasped at the time. For me, and for a lot of the IU football fans that have been out there, it was exciting. Because here was somebody that looked ready to defend Indiana football, to put it forward as something worth valuing. And that was an energy that had not been in the building for a long time. Even with coaches like Tom Allen, who were very enthusiastic, there was an underlying level of, well, we're lucky when we win. And for Curt Cignetti, it was, no, we play to a standard, and the wins will come from that. I don't think that within the college sports landscape, you get those sorts of coaches all the time. And when you are able to find one, if you can give them the resources and give them the ability to actually do something, you're going to have good things happen. And we've seen that lesson in basketball. We also see that lesson in football. And I think it's an important point that gets lost sometimes in the magic of what's happened the last 2 years, which is that Indiana football and Indiana University had to build towards this moment, and the financial pieces had to be in place, and the facilities had to be in place. And that had been about a 15-year process. If you go back to 1995, entering the last 2 years of Bill Mallory's time at Indiana, you could make an argument that Indiana was among the lowest tier teams in terms of the resources they had put in for their football program. The stadium looked essentially unchanged from what it had been 20 years earlier. The resources were so bad that when Indiana went to play in the Independence Bowl in 1993, their opponent, Virginia Tech, stayed in an exclusive resort in the Shreveport area, and Indiana stayed in a motel. That was the level of resource that was being provided at the time. So there had been a buildup, really starting with Rick Greenspan and Fred Glass in the mid-2000s to upgrade the facilities, to enclose the north end zone, to add a full-service weight room, which didn't exist before, to gradually up the salaries of the head coach and eventually the assistant coaches, to put money into things like training tables and recruiting services, to try to get Indiana up to the point where they could at least be competitive for a middle-of-the-pack finish in the conference. And by the time I hired Curt Cignetti, that was all there. And what Cignetti's been able to do is take those resources, multiply them, but channel them through one of the most unique spirits that we've seen in the last 25 to 30 years of college football. I wanted to move forward. I've got some slides here. You know, this is the full aspect of that field. And standing there in not just a full stadium, as you mentioned, but a stadium that had more Indiana fans than Ohio State fans. On a neutral field, hypothetically, yes, I know this is played in Indianapolis, but if you've ever been, one of the not so great secrets about IU football is that if you walk into the football offices, they'll always have one of those big aerial shots of a full stadium with everybody in red. They used to always take that photo during the Ohio State game. I can still remember as a sophomore standing there in the stadium as Ohio State, who was number one in the country, was whooping Indiana and hearing the O-H-I-O chant in Memorial Stadium. Famously, Ohio State fans in 1996, after they clinched the Big Ten title, rushed the field at Memorial Stadium and tore down one of the goalposts. And then went to tear the other one down, and the team had to come back out of the tunnel and surround it. We had a lot of scores to settle against Ohio State that day, but I think the biggest score to settle for me was the fact that we had more people in the building than they did. It was a tremendous experience, a tremendous environment. Who was here? Who here was at that game? Did you back me up on that? It was one of the more incredible things. And to watch Indiana persevere in that game and come out with the victory, it seems weird to say now, having won a national championship, but standing there that moment, it felt like the culmination of everything we had ever hoped for as IU football fans. Just won a national title against the bully of the conference, did so on a neutral field, but did so in a manner that wasn't flukish. You beat them player to player, man to man. And yet that was just the beginning of the journey that we would have over the next month and a half. Which happened partially the next week. That's me with the Heisman Trophy. That thing's heavy, by the way. I don't know if you've ever picked one up, but that sucker is hard to pick up. But the fact that you bring in a quarterback like Fernando Mendoza, who on paper, cultural fit doesn't quite seem like it makes a whole lot of sense. A kid from Miami, fifth generation Cuban American who had played at Cal for 3 years, suddenly finds himself in Bloomington. And yet Fernando Mendoza embodied so many of the details and the spirit that IU fans embrace over time. He's humble, he's hardworking, he's focused on an end goal, and he's able to do so in a way that just makes you feel good inside. Las Vegas Raiders fans are very lucky, and hopefully they can keep him healthy throughout this upcoming year. But for him and his teammates to be able to bring a Heisman Trophy to Bloomington highlighted how Indiana finally felt like they were in an exclusive club that they'd never gotten an invite to in their history. And that meant a lot, not just to the longtime IU football fans that have been in the mix, but to IU alums across the board. One of the most powerful things about college athletics, and something that I talk about in classes all the time, why do we have college athletics? Why do they exist? Yes, there's educational opportunities, and there are tickets to sell, but so much about high-level college athletics is about giving alumni a reason to feel pride in their university and to be able to extend the brand of the university across the country. That and being able to bring a Heisman Trophy home, that's something that doesn't just extend the brand of the university in the moment. It's something that extends it for the next 50 years, the next 75 years, because it's constantly mentioned. And you suddenly feel like you're part of something that you weren't before. Of course, that wasn't the end of things, because Indiana finally gets to go back to the Rose Bowl. Sorry about that picture looking a little creepy with the bend and the thing there, but this was at the media party before the game. I was like, oh, that's a really cool looking helmet. But showing up in Pasadena, we took an interesting route out there. My friend and I decided that instead of flying to Pasadena, we were going to drive. We called it the Stampede to Pasadena in honor of our recent adoption of the bison as the Hoosier mascot. And I figured we'd get a little bit of social media attention through that. I was shocked at the outpouring of not just support, but heartfelt emotional emails and messages sent to us. People who had been following IU football for a couple of generations who weren't able to make the trip, but essentially said, we're living vicariously through you as you make this voyage out there. People who had not gone to the Rose Bowl in 1968 because their dad was like, well, we'll just go next year because we're going to start going to this on a regular basis now. And then over 50 years later, they're still waiting for that opportunity. So it was really emotionally very fulfilling for us to be able to head out there and experience a Rose Bowl filled with crimson. Now, yes, we were playing another crimson team, but being in that stadium, it was 85% Indiana fans, if not more. It was like the entirety of the West Coast of IU alumni had decided to all descend on Pasadena at once. And that was truly exciting to see. And it's funny, I went back and watched that broadcast the other day, and you can hear the broadcasters, Chris Fowler, saying, we're walking through the parking lot, and there's IU fans coming up, and they're in tears because they never thought they'd be here again. And they're like, do you think we have a chance in this game, Chris? And he's like, have you watched your team play this year? They're undefeated. They just won the Big Ten title. And as of course we all saw, Indiana dominated Alabama through 4 quarters. Alabama's fans were all out of there by the middle of the 3rd quarter. The post-game celebration that happened with this, the stands were almost entirely full still. And it was just Indiana fans in shocked disbelief standing around, not believing that they had just beaten Alabama by 35 in the Rose Bowl. It was a truly special moment for anybody that was there. This was when the sun finally came out. It had rained all day. The second half dawns, the B-2 bomber flies over, the sun pops out, and it was essentially just a big party the rest of the way. One win from Miami in Atlanta. And if you thought that the crowd that descended on Pasadena was pro-IU, you hadn't seen anything yet, because the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta was essentially not just a home game, but a home game where the road team decided not to bring anyone. I bought 9 tickets out of the Oregon allotment that were just available online. I don't blame the Oregon fans, because it's a long way to get from Eugene out to Atlanta. But it was an absolutely packed stadium full of IU football fans. And that was probably the thing that was the hardest to get your head wrapped around, was this team that had had trouble getting 30,000 people into its own stadium just a couple of years earlier had managed to fill an almost 70,000 seat stadium twice in consecutive weeks. Getting down to Miami, this was on South Beach, the night that I got there. You can't see me very well, but they had all of these nice CFP displays right along the beach. The vibe felt very positive for Indiana, despite having to play against Miami in their own building. The excitement in Bloomington was palpable. The upstairs pub was hosting a watch party for the championship. It was about 12, maybe 15 degrees Fahrenheit that day. People started camping out at 7 p.m. the night before so that they could go in and get their spot at the bar for a game that wouldn't start until 8 o'clock the next night. But that was the level of excitement that was in Bloomington. And in the stadium, again, Indiana finds themselves with more fans than the team who calls that stadium home, the Miami Hurricanes. That was actually one of the tougher games I've ever watched as a college football fan, as an IU fan, because of how tense it was. And despite Indiana leading in the 4th quarter, there's a penalty called on Indiana at the end. They have to kick a field goal. Miami gets the ball down 6 with about 3 minutes to go. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I've seen this movie before. This is the exact type of game where Indiana's bad luck shows up once again. As it turned out, that didn't happen. Indiana intercepts the pass, Jamar Sharp pulls it down, and Indiana claims the national championship and finishes a 16-0 season for the first time in college football history since Yale did it in 1896. And again, this is Indiana football we're talking about, a team that entered last year as the losingest all-time program in college football history. So, I tell you all of that, and I give you that perspective because I can say from my standpoint as a professor, as someone who studies sports media, but also as somebody who podcasts about it and talks with fans on a regular basis, what we saw out of Indiana is probably the most unexpected story in the history of American sport. And I don't say that lightly, but I'd say for anybody who would point to even somebody like the '69 Nets as a team that was an improbable champion, those are professional athletes. That was a team that was built up and had some stars on it. This was a team that was built out of largely cast-off pieces the first year or so, a coach that hadn't gotten a shot at the FBS level and then had to bring a team up to FBS to be coaching at that level. Yes, rules have changed in college football, but Indiana somehow managed to pull together the secret sauce to make itself competitive in that era on the front end. And that comment that was made earlier about steadiness and perseverance towards an end goal, there is some of that, but there's also a level of being ready when things align in your favor and being ready to capitalize on a market that has changed. One of the things I think is most fascinating and compelling about Curt Cignetti is this is a gentleman who 15 years ago was coaching at a Division II school, Indiana University of Pennsylvania, where they're having to deal with partial scholarships and they're having to pay assistant coaches stipends, not actual salaries. They're sharing bedrooms in a rented house, just trying to make ends meet. And this is essentially the same group that a decade later is hoisting a national championship trophy. So there's a lot of perseverance there on that coaching staff's part, but there's also a lot of learning that went in along the way. And this idea that you can learn to work with fewer resources if you apply them intelligently. If you can properly identify talent and implement that talent in a way that gives you efficiencies over teams that might have higher skilled players who aren't necessarily fully ready or able to give what they can give on a down-by-down basis. And when you think about Indiana University, this comes at a perfect time, because this is a university that I think needed something to rally around, needed something central that people could take pride in, and something that perhaps nobody had thought of as a point of pride. You know, I always remember talking with folks that would come through orientation on campus, and you would have orientation leaders telling incoming freshmen, yeah, nobody really goes to football games. No one's really that interested in that. Everybody just waits for basketball season. And now I get reports of students coming in and orientation leaders saying, yeah, everybody focuses on football games. Nobody really goes to basketball. So hopefully Indiana can get both of those things up and running soon. But I think it just points to the immense cultural shift that has happened at IU. And it's an alignment that is very critical in this age of higher education. And I say this as someone that's worked in higher ed for 20 years. It's a very difficult landscape right now, and you have to have a cultural aspect to put alongside your educational aspects to attract students to your campus. And for Indiana University at this point to be able to point to football as a place where everybody can come together, alumni, students, business leaders, citizens of Southern Indiana, Central Indiana, across the country, something to unite that largest alumni base in the country. It's been fascinating watching it happen in such a short period of time. And it's something that I have a hard time putting into words. And so with that, I'd love to open it up to questions that anybody might have about any aspect of this journey. And once again, I greatly appreciate your hospitality and having me down here today.
Dr. Clavio, thank you so very much for all that. And I'm going to ask the first question, because that's my point of privilege as the club president. And then lining up behind me are going to be fellow Rotarians. If you have a question, now is the time. I think we got some folks working on this microphone, which is why I'm speaking a little bit more loudly. The microphone will be with us shortly, just like magic. All right. So, fellow Rotarians, it sounds like we're going to have a mic change. Here we go. How is Mama Mendoza doing?
She's doing great. That was one of the more heartwarming aspects of that entire journey, was the love that the Mendoza brothers expressed for their mom. If you watch the Heisman Trophy ceremony, I couldn't keep it together. I actually shed some tears with that. But she's doing well, and they've continued their charity work in supporting, trying to find a cure for her illness as they've moved through. But it was really one of many stories like that that made that team last year so attractive to so many people, I think.
Right, yes. All right. Kent Euler, it's your time. Use your outside voice, buddy.
Thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome. Here we go.
This is how I have to lecture most of the time. So.
Thank you. As a guy who's been born and walked with the Purdue campus, it's amazing how you can become an IU fan. I didn't think that was possible.
I brought my fandom with me from where I was before. So.
I had three real quick questions, which I thought were very important. One, if the buffalo was replacing is something as the icon for the mascot for IU, what was there before?
So there was no official mascot. The bison, so for those who don't know, obviously I think you're all well aware of the history of bison in this area. They used to cover the eastern United States all the way up to Pittsburgh, and then we killed them all, essentially. But we've always had bison as part of the imagery of the state of Indiana. It's on the state seal. And there was a bison mascot in the 1960s and early 1970s, but it was frightening? Yeah, it was very frightening. If you ever see pictures of it on Google, it's like, wow, I'm surprised they went that way. But It didn't really replace anything, but it sits alongside Hoosiers, which is never going anywhere, and the classic Pitchfork logo. So it's a nice additive, and a lot of it really was, there's a marketing and sales opportunity with having a mascot that you don't get when you don't have one.
Okay, well, Colorado becoming calling there. But my far more important question I did want to ask, is there any chance that Fernando Mendoza's aunt is going to be back in the stands this year? Remember her?
I'm not sure about that one. I'm guessing probably not at this point, but we'll have to wait and see. I still harbor some thoughts perhaps Alberto might come back again. Fernando's brother is starting in Georgia Tech this year, but we'll have to see. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I have one question, or two questions especially. I noticed in the preseason AP poll, Indiana, the national champion, if I'm not mistaken, was rated 6th, not even in the top 5. So my question is, how do people in Bloomington feel about this? Is there a little bit of resentment, a little bit of chip on the shoulder, and if so, does that give the team any little competitive edge?
It's a great question. I'd say there's two simultaneous answers to the question about how people in Bloomington feel. On the one hand, I think there is some resentment, because if you took on paper what Indiana has coming into this season, return 12 starters, bring in the #1 transfer class in the nation, bring in a proven quarterback that started over 30 games, and you put that same set of criteria on Georgia and said, oh, Georgia just won the national title, they'd be #1 easily coming into the year. So I do think that Bloomington residents and IU fans feel like their team is being unfairly slept on. On the other hand, if you told any IU fan 2 years ago that they'd be starting the season ranked 6th in the AP poll, they would have been like, where do I sign? So I think that there's a little bit of we're being slept on. There's clearly some brand bias. There's clearly a lot of people amongst media and amongst coaches who have a hard time getting their heads wrapped around what Indiana's done and the fact that Indiana might be a perennial power. They still look at what's happened the last 2 years as a fluke. But by the same token, it's great because it gives you natural bulletin board material, and that's the exact kind of thing that Kurt Signetti loves to use. So I think people, even if they're resentful, are probably a little thankful at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. This is so much fun to listen and talk and see how much joy that you've been brought. I'm a long-standing, suffering Vanderbilt football fan, but anyway, when we went there, we had to cheers. That's okay. That's all right. That's okay. You'll work for us someday. Stay in And then I was in Santa Monica on January 1st, and there were hundreds of IU fans and handfuls of Alabama fans. And then my question is, well, anyway, the next one is, so, what college or university can claim undefeated seasons in basketball and football within the past 50 years?
Within the past 50 years,
there's one.
There's one. And really, even if you go back beyond that, there's not that many. I think UCLA has 1 or 2. I think North Carolina might have 1. But it demonstrates something about IU, which is, and I think that many schools from the Midwest have the same kind of thing. Athletic success, historically in higher education, a lot of people have felt that it detracted from the educational mission, that it was something to be minimized. And Indiana's always been this pendulum of, there have been moments when we've taken it seriously, there have been moments when it's been de-emphasized. There's been no greater outpourings of support and pride for the university than when their athletic programs have been at the highest level. And I think hopefully it's awakened in everybody the idea that yes, being good at athletics is a perfectly fine pursuit, and you can do that alongside what you're doing in terms of your academics. And so the excitement that people feel about having that bookended claim of having those 2 undefeated teams, I think it restores for a lot of people the idea that yes, well, we love to see this out of Indiana, and we love to be able to publicly associate ourselves with Indiana.
My question is, so Mark Byington is the basketball coach at Vanderbilt from James Madison. What's in the water?
What's in the water? I know. Well, and UCLA just hired Bob Chesney as their new head coach, and everybody's very excited about him also as at James Madison. It's a great question because I look at James Madison and Indiana as similar in that they have been forced to be innovators. James Madison was stuck at the FCS level. They realized there were many advantages in moving up to FBS. So they went out, they spent a lot of money to upgrade facilities, to upgrade their approaches, to go out and get coaches that could win at the highest level, and then identify the right people who understood what things were like right now. Indiana did the exact same thing when they hired Kurt Signetti, and I would argue Vanderbilt, after what had been a series of not as impressive basketball coaches, went out and found someone who really understood the modern environment. And I think it's so easy in college sports to get caught up in brand history and this idea that there's a hegemony that can't be broken. What Indiana should be for many people is a beacon of hope. That you can be a Vanderbilt or an Ole Miss or a school that has historically been second or third tier, or in Indiana's case significantly lower than that, and be smart about what you're doing and elevate yourself into that upper tier. And it leaves most of the big brands wondering, where did we miss? How did we end up on the wrong side of this? And to me, that's one of the best stories and the best lessons to learn out of this entire process. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is on your role or your industry's role. What was it for communication, sports communication, media? How important is that role in this journey? And what words of encouragement or guidance do you have for new college graduates with a communications degree and a sports management focus?
Thank you for the question. I have often said that, so sports media, I was a graduate of a sport communication program in 2001. And that was really the last couple of years where you had to pick a lane. I was a radio broadcaster. I was not expected to write articles. I was not expected to be on camera. Within 5 years, that entire equation had changed. And what I've watched over the course of the last 20 years has been an industry where you've had all of these different functions grow together. And you now, when I teach my students, we have to teach them not just how to write, but also how to be on camera, how to utilize social media, how to think about production and management, with the idea that they are probably going to be asked to do all of those things at some point down the line. That might seem daunting, but I look at it as a great opportunity. Because the flip side of that is, I would argue every industry is in media now. Every business, every charity, you have to have a message that you can generate yourself and put in front of your stakeholders and your constituents and your potential customers. And that has opened up so many opportunities for students that would graduate with media or communications degrees, because they have options now that they never had when I was a graduate. Like, there was no, let's take the Indianapolis Colts, there was no Colts media department where they were producing anything other than press releases and hoping that the Indianapolis Star would come and cover their stuff. Now the Colts are producing videos and articles that rival or exceed what might be produced by independent media. And I think that's a really powerful message, because right now what we find ourselves in is an environment where everybody's competing for attention. But you have the tools to generate the content that will draw that attention to you. And I think for a place like Indiana University, the ability to showcase your own athletes, the ability to showcase your own facilities, and the ability to connect with alumni across the country is right now at a place where it's never been in its history. I can talk with somebody in Seattle with an Indiana degree or somebody in Miami with an Indiana degree when I go home and podcast tonight. And that's what I tell students. It's like, there are niches out there that you can take advantage of, and there are going to be companies that you might have never thought of working for that are going to need your services and your expertise. And the more experience we can give you covering football, covering basketball, covering the campus environment, the better off you're going to be down the line. And I've been very proud of many of our graduates who have been able to find their way in a variety of different aspects of these industries, because there's a need for them right now.
Thank you.
So Dr. Clavio, I could sit here and listen to you for another hour. This has been so much fun and so exciting. And I was really happy to hear you say that as a radio broadcaster, it's all now about the camera. right? Because years ago, when I would get invited to be interviewed on the radio, I would always take props with me. And the people would say, what are you going to do with those? I said, well, we're going to show them to people. I knew the day would come when it would land on the camera. So thank you for that. We want to give to you a gift. And I am presenting to Dr. Clavio the Paul Harris Fellow 4-Way Test Challenge Coin. And this is something that we give to each of our weekly speakers because we want you to have a tangible manifestation of something that is not Sisyphean. Did he use a Sisyphean reference during his comments? That's a first, sir. Thank you for that. But we hope that you will take that and carry it with you and share that with your students because our 4-way test is on there. And Paul Harris founded this concept in this club in 1905 in Chicago, and we have 45,000 clubs around the world. And you too, if you were a Rotarian, well, I guess even as a guest, are welcome anywhere in the world. Dr. Clavio, thank you so very much. We appreciate you. Okay, fellow Rotarians, it's danger zone now because we have 2 minutes left on this clock and we could gavel out and ring the bell and go. But I do want to share a couple more things about those service projects. Don't forget, mark your calendars at Western High School and at Iroquois High School, our annual mentoring sessions are going to begin. And they are life-changing experiences, not just for the students, but for the Rotarians that go to those events. And I've been before, it's been a while. Seawalk, Kuno, you can sign up. They begin September 15th. And at Western High, they're going to begin meeting on Tuesdays, and Iroquois High will be on Wednesday mornings. And then Wrench is here at the front table as running our speech contest this coming year. She needs some volunteers now. That's right, the speech contest isn't until next spring, but she needs some volunteers now who are willing to start coaching and working with some of the participants, all right? So I know there's folks out here in the room that can do that. And then I'll bring you some more opportunities as time goes by. Next week, we have a fantastic speaker coming. 12 noon, we will ring that bell. You can show up at 11:30, but we are going to have with us next week on August 22nd, Dr. Todd Larson, the Chancellor of the American University of Sharjah, United Arab Emirates. And he is going to talk about the American University of Sharjah harmonizing the American educational model with Sharjah's heritage and culture. We're going to see where different cultures can collide and come together and create a confluence just like the Monongahela and the Allegheny Rivers come together in Pittsburgh to form the Ohio. That's right. Until that, yes, I can't resist it. It's all about the Bella riverboats for me these days. All right. So we hope that you'll use the QR code, register for next week, and Service Projects Committee is meeting over there in the boardroom right after this meeting. If you're not a member, you can still go in and join them. I'm opening the door. Fellow friends, Rotarians, and guests, we are, oh God almighty, there it is. That sign, it has been attributed anthropomorphic characteristics. It can actually talk and it can answer questions. It is called the What is Rotary sign. And I believe Rick Harnet's going to be at the table today. Will all of our guests please go over there and Papa C, Mama C, and the C notes? We love y'all. Can't wait to hear you all perform tonight. See me if y'all got questions about that. We are adjourned.